This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Hello and welcome back to another class on learning to use the Greek New Testament. Today we're going to talk about defining a Greek word. Because as you study through the Bible and as you begin to dissect those verses and look carefully into the biblical text, you're going to notice some very, very rich information when it comes to word studies and defining a word. You know, as we study through any document and begin to look at words and try to define those words, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. Sometimes we assume the meaning of a word when maybe that meaning that we're assuming is incorrect. And perhaps we could sort of add to the difficulty of understanding that words have a history. It's called etymology, that words sometimes change in meaning over time. Now I'm holding in my hand a copy of an English dictionary. And if you were to look at this dictionary, for example, under the word church, it would be defined as a building for public, especially for public use or especially Christian worship. Now, the temptation that some people have is when they're studying a word in the Bible is to run to a modern English dictionary to define that word. But the problem is this, is that words change in their meaning over time. In fact, if I were to ask you, well, what good is a dictionary? What does a dictionary do for you? You'd obviously say, well, it defines words. Well, that's true, and it would be only a part of the answer because dictionaries do a great number of things for you. They provide a number of great tools and resources for you in regard to language, in regard to words. But the truth is that dictionaries are always being republished. New editions are coming out all the time. Why is that the case? It's the case because words often change in their meaning and new words are added to our own language. Words that change in meaning, for example, the word mouse. The word mouse. 30 years ago, if you would have looked in a dictionary under the word mouse, you'd have just seen a definition in regard to a little small creature that maybe hides in the crevices of a wall somewhere or out in the prairie. But now, today, there would be a secondary or a secondary meaning to the word mouse, and it would have reference to that device that you use with computers to move the cursor, to move the pointer around on your screen. And another example would be the word gay. A few years ago, or about a year or so ago, my son Jacob was reading a book from the library that he picked up, and it was published in the 1940s, 1950s, and he came across the word gay. And he says, Dad, this is a book that is not a good book. It's got the word gay in it. And I said, well, what year was it published? And he told me, and I said, well, gay at that time had a good meaning attached to it. It meant someone that was basically happy or happy-go-lucky, so to speak. But of course, we know today it has a very negative connotation because it has reference to one who is a homosexual, that of which, of course, the Bible condemns. And so you see how, over time, words can change in their meaning. So just consulting a modern English dictionary for defining biblical words is not going to be always the best place to go. Now, that doesn't mean that you eliminate an English dictionary altogether in your study of the Bible because, again, some good dictionaries out there have good information in them. They will trace the origin of a word, its word etymology, and talk about usage and so forth, and spelling. And so it's a very excellent tool. But if you really want to get down to the rich, deep meaning of words and define them as they were intended to be defined and understood in the light of the Bible, in light of the Bible context, then you need to go to one of several sources that I want to share with you today. The first general area of sources that I want to share with you today, as you'll see on the screen, is general Bible dictionaries. General Bible dictionaries. What are some of those dictionaries? Well, I have a couple of them here on my desk. One of them is sort of an old standard standby. I think it's a very good dictionary. It's called Vine's Expository Dictionary. This one happens to be a dictionary of Old and New Testament words. It's a rather older dictionary, but still a very good one. And what it does is it defines every word as used in the New Testament. Now, the Old Testament portion of it just defines some of the more general, widely used words in the Old Testament, some of the more theologically important words. But Vines will take just about every word, and as you can see, as we'll get sort of a close-up here, if we were to turn to maybe, let's find a good word here. If we were to go over here to the word peacemaker, you would see, for example, that he gives it to you just as you would find it in your English text, and then he's going to give you the Greek word transliterated into English, and then there's the Greek word right there, okay? And then he'll give you a short definition of it, and also places where it is found. Now, one of the other things that he does, if you were to look at, for example, we'll turn back a page to this word peace, and you'll notice that he gives you the noun form of it and where in various places it is found. And then he'll go over here and define the verb form of it and show you various places, as well as how it's used as an adjective. And he doesn't always give you just a strict denotative meaning of that word, and by that I mean just a real basic fundamental meaning of it. He'll sometimes expand upon it, and thus it's called an expository dictionary, that is taking that word and explaining it based on information from the text. And so you want to be careful that you always understand what kind of book that you're looking at, because sometimes, as we'll talk about in just a moment, you have theological dictionaries which don't just give you a strict denotative meaning of the word, okay, its most basic lexical fundamental form, but they'll also maybe expand upon it, giving more explanation from a theological perspective. All right, so that's one particular tool that you might find helpful. Another one is this New Bible Dictionary that is sort of a more modern dictionary. It doesn't define every word, but it does define more of the important words and terms and goes into detail. Like, for example, here is a dictionary, and I guess it's Old and New alike, of names of God. Okay, names of God. Basic names like El in the Old Testament, and then another forms of El. And then if you were to turn the page, you would basically see the word name Jehovah. Okay, and so it's a little bit more like an encyclopedia, but it is still a very useful tool in defining words. New Bible Dictionary, this is the one I'm holding here, second edition. InterVarsity Press is the publisher, or Tyndall House Publishers as well, in Wheaton, Illinois. So J.D. Douglas is the organizing editor. All right, so that's one good tool that you could use, among which there are many. There are many. And if you'll take a look at other books on exegesis, books that discuss how to study the Bible, there's a book published by a man by the name of Danker, who published a book called Multi-Purpose Tools for Bible Study, and in there he'll list various dictionaries that are available. So there are many, many dictionaries that are made available by various and sundry publishers. So those are just a few. Another one that can be helpful, although it's not technically a dictionary but more of an encyclopedia, and the word encyclopedia, if you were to break that down, has reference to a sort of two words in there, knowledge and circular, so a sort of circular or roundabout knowledge, and then there's also the Greek word in there for child or children. So in other words, for the young, for maybe those who are young in their understanding about something, what an encyclopedia will do is give you a sort of general roundabout knowledge for a person who does not understand maybe something about baptism, maybe something about the church, maybe something about God, maybe something about Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're young in the faith that these aren't, that the encyclopedias aren't helpful. They are. I'm just trying to emphasize to you what the general idea is behind an encyclopedia. It doesn't define every word is used in the New Testament or in the Old Testament, whatever the case may be, but it takes more of the general, more of the terms that are theologically more important, maybe terms that aren't necessarily found in the Bible but refer to religious things or times that have information that have reference to things going on at that time. And anyway, it's very rich. This is the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. This is an older edition. There's been a newer edition that's come out in within the last 20 or 30 years. And so anyway, just like the word apollyon, as it's found in the book of Revelation, it'll tell you about the background, give you the definition, the New Testament usages of it, and so forth. And you can see how this might work. The word apparel. Apostolic fathers. Well, apostolic fathers, that term in general is not in the Bible, but it refers to religious things. It refers to biblical, the world of the Bible in terms of the apostles and the writings that came from those who knew the apostles and so forth. So anyway, that's just another example of what I'm talking about as far as the kinds of dictionaries that are made available to you in a general sense. So those are general Bible dictionaries. General Bible dictionaries. All right, another sort of category of dictionaries has to do with then the Greek-English lexicon. The Greek-English lexicon. Notice that title, the Greek-English lexicon. Because what these tools are that we're going to examine are the tools that are taking Greek words, and you look them up by their alphabetical order in Greek, but they give the definitions in English. Okay, so you don't have to know the Greek language fluently. You don't even have to know the Greek language even very well to access these dictionaries. They're just emphasizing that they're focusing on the Greek word itself. All right, not the English equivalent of it, in its translation. All right, because those dictionaries we talked about a moment ago, that's what they're based on, are the English words. Now we're going to talk about some tools that focus on the actual Greek words themselves, okay, though the definitions are in English. What do we mean by that? What are some examples of that? Well, let's take a look back here. I have some on my shelf. For example, here's one that is a very well-known particular dictionary. And it is a dictionary that sometimes just referred to as the Arndt and Gingrich Dictionary, because you have a man by the name of F. Wilbur Gingrich, and then also Frederick Danker in the later editions joined the staff. But William F. Arndt and Gingrich actually first translated this work, and they translated it from Walter Bauer. Walter Bauer was a German scholar. And what Walter Bauer did was to basically take Greek, he looked at the Greek words, and what he did was, based on the context of the Bible and extra biblical literature, literature other than the Bible itself, Greek literature that is extant today, that was discovered, that told about the actions and sort of the everyday language of the common man at that time. And what they did was they gathered that information, and then they looked at these words in their context, in those particular extra biblical manuscripts and then the biblical manuscripts, and they saw how the word was being used at that time, and then they came out with their own definition of it. Based on the context, based on how those words were being used in the first century, and then gave us definitions, you see, for us today to use from first century times. Walter Bauer, again, was a German. He did that in the German language, okay? So the definitions, while they used the Greek words, the definitions themselves were in German. Well, what ended up happening is Arndt and Gingrich came along, and they translated his work from German over into English, so that we now have what Walter Bauer did in English. The definitions are in English. And then later on, of course, after Arndt died, then Danker had joined the staff and producing these newer editions. Now, so you want to be careful, because these men are not inspired, of course. They are subject to making mistakes, as a very interesting story could be told about how that even one of the brothers, one of our own brothers in Christ, Hugo McCord, who several years ago noticed that there was a difference between what Bauer had said and what Arndt and Gingrich had said in regard to the Greek word solo. And he wrote them about it and asked them to make that changed, and that they had not faithfully translated what Bauer himself had said in defining the Greek word solo, which has reference to a psalm. It did not mean an instrument of music, or an instrument of music was not inherent in that word. And so anyway, he was able to persuade them to in the newer edition to make that correction. So my point is, all these men are doing is taking what information is available to them in the Greek manuscripts, extra-biblical and biblical, and defining for themselves, based on the context, the meaning of these words. The writings from the church fathers are included in that. And so they come up with a definition. So it's a good resource, but it's not the final say-so in all matters. It's not gospel, it's not law, but it is a very, very important tool, a well-known tool that's used in, of course, most seminaries, and that's utilized in various schools of higher learning with regard to biblical literature. So a good well-known source of information. I recommend it to you. Very scholarly. Something else that you might want to be familiar with is this New Thayer's Greek-English lexicon. And this is an older work. It's been around since the late 1800s, and yet is a very, very good conservative work that essentially, again, you look up the words in alphabetical order as far as the Greek alphabet is concerned, and then you'll see the English definition under them as well. So J.B. Thayer is the main editor and author of this, and well recognized. Again, older one, but yet I think a very standard, important lexicon. Okay, and the word lexicon, of course, just means dictionary, and in particular, a dictionary defining words from a particular setting, a particular context, a particular time. Then you have dictionaries like this one here by Eugene Nida and Lowe, and theirs is a little bit different in that they group their words by what are known as semantic domains. They'll take words that are sort of from one particular category, or that the synonyms of words from one particular item. For example, the word rock. Well, Greek has the word petra. It has the word lithos as just two examples of the kinds of things that come from that domain of things talking about rocks or ledges or whatever. And so lithos, petra are then going to be grouped together. So you can't look it up alphabetically here. What you do is you have an index here in this particular one, and you would find the word, whether it's, you could look it up by the Greek, or if you wanted to, you could look it up by the dictionary, by English letters. For example, the word draw, or the word disheartened or dishonest. And you would see that it is in section 57, paragraph 247, and it'll show you other words that are related to that. But as you see in this particular part of the actual lexicon itself, then you can see how these words then are identified by their number. Here's the Greek word, and then a definition under them. So it can be very helpful if you're studying maybe about Petra, meaning rock, or Petros, the name for a stone, that is in reference to a specific noun, Peter, that all of those would be sort of grouped together, and you could see words that are used in a similar way, but yet are different words, but refer to maybe similar concepts and ideas. So I think a very helpful lexicon, a Greek-English lexicon that you might want to make yourself aware of. There are other ones out there many other dictionaries out there. Liddell and Scott have one that is again a very accepted and well-known particular Greek lexicon. And then also there is one from that I wanted to make you aware of, and that has to do with the Greek word study dictionaries. Let's go to that section now, the Greek word study dictionaries. So we've talked about now general Bible dictionaries. We've talked about Greek-English lexicons. Let's talk about some more refined works that will focus on words and yet give you even more than just the basic denotative meaning of something, the strict, most basic meaning. For example, if you took the word baptism and you defined that, and you were to look it up in most of these other Greek-English lexicons, baptism would simply just be defined as immersion, or to plunge, or to dip. And that's about all they would give you, besides some references and other places to look. But when it comes to a theological dictionary, they're going to talk more about that baptism is not just the physical act itself of putting something under the water, but it is a spiritual right, they may call it. It is a command of God, as mentioned in Mark 16:16, Acts 2:38. They would say baptism was for the remission of sins, Acts 2:38, and discuss it more in detail. They might give its etymology, its history as it was used in the classical era of Greece and of Greek times, and then sort of trace its meaning, and maybe talking about its usage outside of the Bible as well. So what are some of those tools that are available to us? Well, one of the best ones that's really user-friendly and very helpful, I think, is published by, or is edited by a man by the name of Colin Brown. Colin Brown, and sometimes we just refer to it as Brown's Dictionary. But the specific title is the New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology. Okay, so the New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology, and it's published by Zondervan. It comes in 4 volumes, a very, very good work. Another one, and a very well-known particular work, and I've only got a copy of 2 of them here, actually just 1 volume, one of them's an index, is this work sometimes just referred to as Kittle's. And this is the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, sometimes called TDNT, Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. And there are 10 volumes, a 10-volume dictionary set that go into great detail over many of the words in the New Testament. And you can either look that word up by here we have as found in Mark, and you can look it up by chapters and so forth and what words are being used. It can also be determined by the words themselves, and you get a number. Then it tells you what volume to look in. What volume to look in as far as of the 9 other volumes out there that they have, and what page number. So once you get the reference here from the index, then you're going to run over here to the book itself, and you'll notice that they'll have the entry here of the Greek word, and then they'll talk about the Greek sphere, the usage of it. It'll come across here and talk about Greek hymns to the gods, and this word hymnos here, and the Old Testament and its use in Judaism from the Septuagint translation, okay, and which is the Septuagint translation, of course, is the Greek translation of the Old Testament scriptures from the Hebrew. And so you can actually even study then Greek words in the Old Testament as long as you understand you're studying from the Septuagint translation. Well, so very extensive. You can see a lot of scholarly resources here that are identified, a lot of good information, very good, very in-depth source of information, but these are theological dictionaries. Again, pay attention to the title. This is not a strict Greek lexicon. It is a theological dictionary of New Testament words, but very rich indeed as far as scholarly material. Then there are other specialized books as well, like A.T. Robertson has a volume of books that are known as word study books, and they sort of go in line. I showed you some of those in the previous, go in line with the text itself. I showed you that in the previous session. And also there are other books like the one here by Spurios Zadahates, the Complete Word Study Dictionary. So many good tools out there that allow you quick and easy access to these great Greek words that we're talking about. All right, one other tool that we want to focus on when it comes to the use of defining a Greek word that I believe is perhaps the most important tool of all, because it allows you as a Bible interpreter to get right at the meaning of the word without having to strain it through all of the scholars or people who have their own ideas about it maybe, but allows you to do your own work. You become sort of your own lexicographer, one who studies words and then writes about them. You can do your own work. That's what's exciting about what I'm going to share with you next, and you may be surprised at what tool it is. It's a concordance. It's a concordance. The use of a Greek concordance is very, very important. Now notice on the screen it says a Greek concordance. Well, let's stop just for a moment and talk about what we mean by a regular concordance. What do we mean by an English concordance? Well, I have before me a concordance here, and what it does is, of course, as I'm sure that many of you are familiar with, is that it takes every word in the Bible and it'll tell you where that word is found in every place in the Bible, if it's an exhaustive concordance. Some concordances don't do that. They're abridged, they're shorter versions or whatever. But if it's an exhaustive concordance, it'll take even the prepositions and conjunctions, like the word and it'll cite for you every time, every place that word and is found in the Bible. Well, if you were to look, for example, at one particular word here that we're going to show you on your screen, you would notice that it's the word sober. And if you were just studying in your Bible and you said, well, I know that the Bible speaks about sobriety or being sober, but I don't know where it is. Where could I find it? Well, you could look this up in its alphabetical order, the word sober, and you would find it, and you would see then a listing of where sober is used, 2 Corinthians 5:13, or whether we be, and then they just abbreviate it, S, sober, it is for your, 1 Thessalonians 5:16, they give you just a portion of that scripture. So it lists every place the word sober is found, and then when you come across the word soberly, it'll list everywhere that one is found as well, okay? So, and then sober-minded. So that's what an English concordance can do for you, very helpful tool. So get you an exhaustive concordance and use it in that regard. However, when you think about a English concordance, you need to understand you're going to be a little bit limited in some regards as to discovering where that word sober might be found somewhere else in the Bible. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about and how important it is to have a Greek concordance. Take a look at this passage on the screen, Titus 2:11-12. If you were studying this, for the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present age, and you wanted to learn what the word soberly meant, you could go to a dictionary that we've talked about. But let's say that you wanted to do your own study of this, okay? Well, you could go to an English concordance and you could look up the word sober, as we just had a moment ago on the screen, remember, from the English concordance there. And you could find all the places where it's found and then go look in those other places, or those references where it's found, see how the word is being used in the context, okay? And then get an idea from there what that word might mean, just on sort of the context of it. And I'll explain more about that in just a moment. However, with an English concordance, you're going to be limited because that word sober, as it is in Greek, is actually the word sophronos, is not going to be listed in an English concordance because it may be translated by some other word in English, and thus it won't show up in the English concordance. Let me explain more fully of what I'm talking about. Let's go back to a book now, or go over to a book that's called the Englishman's Greek Concordance, and I have it right here, the Englishman's Greek Concordance. And what it does is tell you where the words are being utilized, okay, where those words are being utilized, the Greek word, in every place in the New Testament. Okay, let's take a look at the word sophronos in this Greek lexicon. Here it is now. All right, now notice, here in this concordance it has our word sophroneo. Here's the verb form of it. You would see actually as it's used all the way down here in Titus 2:12. This is the word, the Greek word, that gets translated in the KJV, the King James translation, as soberly. See, and there they actually give it there to you. But you say, well, I want to see where this word is being used in other places. Well, some of these references up here, the root word of it, okay, although it's found in different forms, this is the same root word. Some of these were used, like in Romans 12, verse 3, you would find that in the English concordance. But here's one right here, Mark 5:15, that is used in this Greek concordance that you did not see in the English concordance. It was not there, okay? And the reason is because in the English concordance it was translated, or in the English translation, the KJV is translated right mind. You would have had to look up right mind and know that right mind meant the same thing as sobriety in order to know that it was used in Mark 5:15. And so see, you want to use a Greek concordance because it'll show you everywhere that Greek word is used. Because oftentimes there are many English words that are used to translate one Greek word. I want to say that again. Oftentimes there are many English words that are used to translate one Greek word. And so if you don't know what Greek word you're looking for, or what the Greek word is, and look it up in a Greek concordance, then you might miss out on where all that word is used throughout the New Testament. All right, well, let me see if I can sort of summarize this then for you. We're studying Titus 2:12. We come across the word soberly. If we just looked up soberly in the Greek or in the English concordance, we would see that it's found in several places, that word sober. But if we wanted to find where that Greek word is found, we would have to look up in a Greek concordance and see that there are other places in which that word soberly is found, although not translated soberly, but just as important to defining the meaning of the word. Remember, we looked at that in the Greek concordance, we found that that word sophronos was found also in Mark, the 5th chapter, and yet there was translated right mind. So let's say that we're studying Titus 2:11 and 12, and we say, well, what does sober mean? I don't want to just run to a Greek lexicon. I don't want to let someone else do my work for me. Let me see how the word is being used in the context, because now here's a very important point. Very important. What is the final determination in coming up with the meaning of a word? How are words defined? On the basis of their context, how they were being used in that context, or in the context, for example, of the Bible. So if I can find somewhere else where that sophronos was used and look at the context of it in the story of, for example, the demonic man, then I can come up with a better understanding of what sobriety is all about. Now that story in Mark 5 goes on in this context, says this: Jesus had come out of the boat, he'd come across the Sea of Galilee over to the Gadarenes on the eastern side, on the eastern shore, and he met a man who was possessed of demons. And this man, the text says, had been in the caves, cutting himself and crying that people tried to bind him, and he would break apart the fetters, the ropes that they used, the chains or whatever that they used to bind him. And basically he was uncontrolled, he was unorganized, he was not rational in his thinking, and he was running around without any clothes on. And then Jesus cast the demons out of him. And the text says in Mark 5:15, I'm going to read it for you now, it says, and they come to Jesus, and they see him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion sitting and clothed, and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Now the King James says, in his right mind. That's the same Greek word found in Titus 2:12. They're translated sober. Here in Mark 5, translated as right mind. So in the context, what does sober mean? It means controlled, organized, rational. And we know that even by defining it on the basis of the opposite of the context, or what was described in the context. That's how you can also define the meaning of the word, by looking at the context, seeing how the Bible oftentimes will define it on the basis of its opposite. Here on the one hand was a man who was uncontrolled, he was irrational, he was unorganized, he was naked, he was not controlled, and yet now he's sober. He's controlled. You see, he's sitting, he's talking, he's in his right mind. So sobriety then, as going back to Titus 2:12, has reference to a Christian who is spiritually in control, who's rational in his thinking. He or she just doesn't go according to the whims of the flesh and act any way that he or she wants to, but rather they're sober, they're in their right mind. They're not allowing intoxicants or anything else to inhibit their ability to think clearly and carefully. So that's sort of an example of what I'm talking about when it comes to using a Greek concordance to find where that Greek word is used in other places in the New Testament, see the context of it, and come away with the meaning based on the context. See, we did that without even looking at any of the Greek dictionaries that were out there. We just took a Greek concordance and our own Bible, and we came up with the meaning of the word as it was intended to be defined in Bible times, particularly, of course, in the first century when the New Testament was written. Well, let me give you another example of what I'm talking about. Let's say we're studying from Colossians chapter 1. Take a look at it on the screen now. Colossians 1, 17 through 29. And we're reading this where Paul's writing to that church whom had evidently, as Paul wrote from prison, instructing them in some things and telling them about what he was concerned about and the greatness of Jesus. He says this, "To them God willed to make known what are the riches," talking about the Gentiles, "of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Him we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus." Now, notice verse 29. "To this end I also labor, striving according to His working, which works in me mightily." Colossians 1, 17 through 29. Now that word, labor there. As I was studying through that particular passage on one occasion, getting ready for a sermon on the goals of our ministry, the goals of Paul's ministry, his preaching, in verse 29 I came across this word labor. I said, what does that mean? What does he mean that he labored? Can I find that word anywhere else in the New Testament? So I looked up that Greek word in a Greek concordance, and I found it also translated in Luke 5. Let's take a look at that one now. Luke 5, verses 4 through 5. And it was the story of when Jesus came to His disciples after they had been fishing all night, told them to cast their nets down to the other side. And listen to what is said. "When He had stopped speaking, He said to Simon, 'Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a catch.' But Simon answered and said unto Him, 'Master, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. The word, and nevertheless at your word, I will let down the nets.'" Now, if we were to back up and look at that previous verse, you would see that the word toil there, the word toiled, see it there on verse 5, is the same word as labor in Colossians 1 in verse number 29. The same word, okay? So as I think about Paul talking about his laboring for the ministry of the gospel of Jesus, I find that same word used in reference or in connection to men who were fishing. They'd been fishing all night. And not the kind of pleasure trip that some might take today to fish, just to go out and get away to catch a few fish to bring home to maybe to eat or just to have fun. These men were doing it for a living. It was their livelihood. And it took great human strength and a lot of energy. And they had calloused hands. And they were men that worked diligently to earn money for their families so they could stay alive. They worked all night at pulling in those nets and out there on that sea. Fishing was a task that was very laborious. It involved a lot of sweat, hard work. And so that's the same word Paul is using in Colossians 1 when it comes to how he felt about the ministry. He labored. He toiled. He worked. He, figuratively speaking, calloused his hands in preaching the gospel. And so, what does it mean to labor? It means to get busy and to work hard and to invest our time and our energy in something that is worthwhile and something that means a great difference. So, utilize these tools. Utilize these lexicons. Utilize a Greek concordance and do your own study of the Bible and come to your own conclusions from the biblical text. Thank God that we have that ability to rightly divide the Word on our own and to be our own student of the Word. That'll help you in your preaching and your teaching. I thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to our next session as we continue on with learning to use the Greek New Testament.